and welcome in. Whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, maybe you're changing dirty diapers, or maybe you finally got a moment to sit back, relax, and listen to your favorite podcast. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're at, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Jay. Today, I'm joined by Jonathan. Jonathan is a remarkable storyteller, producer, and a survivor whose journey has been anything but ordinary. From growing up in a music filled household in London to navigating the highs and lows of Hollywood, Jonathan has built an impressive career in the entertainment industry, but beyond his professional success, Jonathan's personal battles with health, which include two strokes, heart failure, and a heart transplant, have shaped his perspective on life in profound ways. Through his philosophy of rigorous optimism, rugged flexibility, and resilience, Jonathan has turned his challenges into a mission to inspire others. So I'm super excited to dive into his incredible journey today, his new projects, and the lessons he's learned along the way. So, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, thank you very much. I really appreciate this late hour that we're talking. So put your kids to bed, and I'm ready for bed, but I'm alive and ready to talk to you.
I love it. Hey, that's what's important, right? When we spoke, prior to recording today, you wanted to start off with a heart moment or something along those lines.
Yeah, I feel that can you personally can you touch your heart? Just touch your heart. No, look at your heart. Okay. So your heart, that's the right size. So your
Mm-hmm.
heart beats 100,000 times a day. 100,000 times a day. And your heart beats 2,000 gallons a day. And if you clasp your hands together, that's pretty much the size of your heart. And my heart was dying. So you and your audience to kind of understand, it's a miraculous thing, the heart.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a miraculous thing, the heart. So, I got lucky. I got a lifeline. I had a defibrillator built into my heart. It's like you know about defibrillators, so it's all about
Mm-hmm.
the movies, and it's like stand back, and then charge, boom. I had an implantable defibrillator in my heart. And what that does, it shocks your heart. So it's about 360 joules of electricity surging into your body to make sure your heart is aligned and it's beating correctly. So it's called like arrhythmia. And so, it again with the heart, it's just such a miraculous thing. And if you look at your collarbone, right below collarbone is right above your heart. That's where I had my defibrillator. So it's when you spoke about two strokes, heart failure, and aphasia. I just came back from selling a movie at Sundance, and I just, the next day shower, when the shower bottles, you try to read the shower bottles.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it was Greek. I couldn't even read the shower bottles. So I was in the hospital for a couple of weeks, and then I got, discharged, and I couldn't speak. As a producer, a podcaster, in your daily life, how can you do that?
You can't. Like I can't if I don't have that because I work in mental health as my 9 to 5. And so if I can't talk and I can't speak, then I'm not working. My voice is my biggest tool, it's my biggest companion. Without it, I couldn't talk to my wife. I couldn't talk to my kids. I couldn't talk to my friends. I couldn't podcast, which has happened before where days where I had no voice. There's a couple that I toughed through. Those are somewhere back in the catalog of me having little to no voice. And then there's some that just ended up never happening because of not having a voice to speak with. So,
Mm. Yeah, so that's what happened to me for about a year and a half. I remember going into speech therapy, and I could hear, my wife could hear the speech therapist, and the speech therapist was telling my wife, and I couldn't say my own wife's name. I came out as Candy, and which is kind of a cool name, but her name is Cindy, so it's close. But I couldn't say my own wife's name, and the speech therapist said, like, maybe that's as good as it's gonna get, and I'm like trying to express myself and
So
yell that it will get better.
yeah,
It will
so
get better.
during this, I'm curious, were cognitively was everything the same? Like in your head, you could still like speak in the same full sentences as we are now and have the same thought patterns, the same thought processes and whatnot. It just didn't come out anymore. It just wasn't coming out.
Yeah. So when you have a stroke, you
Hmm.
get brain damage.
Yeah.
It's so I I lost about 20% but sometimes, even today, after the heart transplant and because of the aphasia, sometimes I have to ask people to repeat and repeat and repeat their questions, or I don't, sometimes there's a blank look, like, what did he say? I don't know what you said. But most of the time I can fake it, and based on age you could say, oh, he's a little old, so he doesn't really know what he's talking about, or he just wants you to repeat it. Maybe he's going to deaf, but you can fake it and people really don't know. But I believe cognitively, I understood what people were saying, and they were just talking, and I wanted to join in because they're talking about my health, and I have a voice, I have a vote.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's important because we have to be able to communicate, right? As
Yeah,
humans, as people, we need to be able to communicate. If we're not communicating, we can't do anything, especially working in, I would imagine, being a producer. If you can't talk and communicate, there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of
yeah,
issues that can happen, that do happen, that came up then after. And so, with all this, with all these struggles, and first and foremost, your story is filled with resilience, up and down, top to bottom, left to right, side to
yeah,
side, diagonal,
yeah,
through and through. Like, I have met people later in life that have, through church and other avenues, who have had strokes or have had, heart transplants and whatnot. And they're just not the same. They can be, they definitely can be, but there's something there to where it's just different. If you knew them before and then you knew them after a stroke, it's just different. And it's kind of like throwing in the towel, kind of. But your story is different. You did not throw in that towel. So
yeah.
from your early struggles to reinventing yourself in the entertainment industry, what what made you realize that you needed to keep fighting despite all the setbacks?
Right. So as the show, young fathers, and I had two young kids at the time. So I had to, as a movie producer producing movies, clearly I lost that business, right? Because you can't talk. And it took about a year and a half. And so I reinvented. I mean, I've done this many times, from being a music supervisor to a producer of feature films, and then I reinvented myself as a reality producer. So I reinvented myself as a reality producer, and the first show I sold was a show to television, and it was about my 16-year-old son, and he was Party Prince 90210, and it was a show that aired on is a show that aired on television. So right of the way, even though I can't really communicate, I was able to sell a show because most people want to hear themselves speak, as I'm doing to you right now, but most people convince themselves that they're right. And I had to not speak. My son spoke, the manager, the agent, and the executives convinced themselves, because I had to stand back, right? Like
Hmm.
my defibrillator stand back, and they sold themselves. So that was the reinvention. And then I went on to produce 10 reality shows.
Wow.
And then I got, considerably sicker and sicker and sicker. But it's interesting when you have a defibrillator in your heart, and at that point, it was still hard to talk. You allow people to talk for you, and most of the time they
Oh, that's
convince
hard.
themselves anyway, right?
Hmm.
And was that person that, for a time being, I was not doing, anything like podcasting, but I looked like I was super smart because I allowed people to speak for themselves. Now
Yeah.
the opposite is true. I speak too much.
Yeah. And that's something interesting, like I see things there. Like everyone always wants to hear themselves talk. Like I
Mhm.
feel like we don't take the old saying serious enough when it comes to we have two ears and one mouth. We were given two ears for a reason, we were given one mouth for a reason. And so being able to listen to others, and I can't imagine the amount of just hu- humility that it took to allow others to speak for you. You're an intelligent guy. You have this knowledge. You have all these ideas banging around in your brain. You have all these things that you want to say and want to do and want to communicate and whatnot cognitively that are up there. But being able to take that back seat, kind of makes sense to why people thought, oh, this guy's so smart, kind of
Right.
thing, And also
Yeah.
they're filling in the blanks with their ideas and whatnot too. But I mean, when we just allow others to speak and to talk and to give them that space to be open, you know, they're gonna feel like, man, you're really smart, be able to help me. You're really smart to really have this idea, and little do they know that's their idea that they're just kind of soundboarding off of you and using you as that like sounding piece for what they're trying to work on and get out of their head. And it's great when you're able to get those ideas out of your head because they can lead to some really awesome end results.
But Jay, so the thing is, when you're waiting, anticipating to talk, you're not waiting for the person to complete his thought. You're not waiting for the person to you're just waiting for your turn or interrupting.
Mm.
You're not really listening to what that other person is saying because you want to be the smartest person in the room. The counterpoint is people who don't speak that much, maybe they're shy or they really don't have much to say. You kind of assume they're taking it all in. And then I learned that trick to be taking it all in because I couldn't speak. So clearly today, after about 16 years, with the defibrillator, and I had two defibs. I want to show you one of them.
Yeah.
I want to get your attention. So this was in my chest, and it shocks my heart. So fortunately, the surgeon actually allowed me to keep it. I
I mean,
got my heart.
that's a pretty cool souvenir, all in all.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
So does
mean,
it still shock or no?
if you plugged it in, it
So
goes.
so that was essentially attached to your heart or next
Well,
to your heart
it,
or
it was the collarbone. Go down from the collarbone.
okay.
There's the heart, and there was a couple of cords that attach to the heart. So they have to make an incision, like a zipper,
Okay.
right? A little zipper, and then they put it in, and then the surgeon goes into the heart and he attaches it. So that's called the defibrillator. I was very lucky. My first surgeon gave it back to me when I got the heart transplant. They last about 8 years. So first time, 8 years, shocked me two or three times. The last time, I shocked me 5 times. And so that transplant surgeon did not give it back to me, which I was kind of upset about, but I got a heart in the
So
meantime.
you had three, three shocks with your old heart transplant,
No,
or
three
no,
shots the first time. Then
three
I got a
shocks.
defibrillator.
Okay, because time elapsed. So 8 total shocks between first surgery and heart transplant.
Yeah,
So
so I
essentially, that's like 8 times where your heart essentially stopped working as it was supposed to,
yeah,
and it needed a little boost to get going.
right. So the boost is what people don't realize is you can light up not a house, it's a 100-watt bulb, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a funny story, my cardiologist told me, very empathetic guy, and he said, I really, really I empathize with you, and I want to be there with you when when you get shocked. And I said, you know what? I'm going to bring my taser, and I will shoot you and taser you. And he's like, a momentary pause because no one actually told him that. And he's like, I don't want to be that empathetic. So I understand what you're going through, but I don't want you to
Yeah,
taser me.
yeah. Let's learn the difference between sympathy and empathy there for a little bit, because
Yeah,
empathy is walking in someone else's shoes, and sympathy is having the feelings of feelings with the
yeah,
other person and sympathizing with them. It's like, okay, you're scared. I understand that you're scared, kind of thing. Empathizing is when you have been through the same thing, or you are willing to go through the same thing with someone else, kind of thing.
yeah,
So these health battles, shocked 8 times. So essentially, there's 8 times between incision and heart transplant, to where life could look a lot different if that wasn't there. Essentially, if
well,
I'm understanding it correctly.
yeah, I want to tell you. So when you get shocked consistently 8 times, so you wake up, after your fourth shock, right? You technically no blood goes to the brain. Technically, you die for a momentary. But the fact is, when you have that momentary, okay, I'm dead, but I'm now being recharged. It takes a toll on the heart. So
Yeah.
being shocked multiple times, you also wake up one day PTSD. So people think, oh, I went to a war zone. I have PTSD. Well, no, if you get shocked and you don't
Yeah.
know if you're going to wake up next to your wife and she's kind of freaking out, like, I don't want you to wake up and you've died. I want you to be, so you're freaked out when you go to bed.
Yeah. No, it's terrifying just to think about. Think about if that was something that could ever happen to me. I mean, I have a slight heart murmur and arrhythmia, whatever the heck it's called. I've been told both by different doctors throughout my life. So I have something going on there. Uh, and so just thinking like this, you know, God willing, is not in the
Mhm.
cards for me. But just thinking of something like that's terrifying. And with the PTSD, it makes a lot of sense, because those are all traumatic experiences on the brain and on the body.
Yeah,
The maybe you wake up and you're okay, but the brain's going to remember those as traumatic incidents. The nervous system's going to remember that as a
yeah,
traumatic incident. The body, the heart, the mind, the nervous system, they're going to remember those as traumatic incidents. And those are going to give you PTSD, especially if they happen at night. The body's going to remember that, like, okay, we don't want to go to sleep. We don't want to go to
right.
sleep because we don't want that to happen to us, or we don't want to get in the shower, or, we don't want to get behind the wheel of a car, or we're not going to go to that one grocery store where it happened that one time. Like, those are all PTSD moments, and so it's really important to recognize and to get the right help on there. And it's not, PTSD isn't reserved just for
Right.
veterans or someone who's been through something traumatic as well. That it can be things like this too. Like, PTSD comes in all different shapes and sizes, and it's important to recognize that. And
Yeah.
so being shocked 8 times, going through the different traumatic experiences, and essentially near-death experiences 8
Yep.
times,
Yeah.
essentially. How has that changed your perspective on life, on work, on all the things?
Yeah. So I was living on borrowed time. So, right? I mean, and I knew I was listed for a heart transplant. So I was living on borrowed time, and it was just a matter of when. So your question is, how did I deal with this? Sitting in a hospital room for 30 days waiting, and you have to match people. So it's the same blood, and I'm not a big guy. I'm kind of 5'7", and a slight guy, and I don't weigh a lot. So unfortunately, I got a woman's heart because same size, same blood type. So I got, and I was so, and also when you go for a heart transplant or any transplant, they want to make sure that you have adequate care. You've got someone, you have a good support system.
Yeah, most
So
definitely.
so I mean, I went through that situation, and I changed my hospital room. I knew I knew I knew I was going to live, and then I had to find new purpose. So whether you say it's purpose, people say, oh, reinvented yourself. Well, I reinvented my purpose, and I had to have for me a philosophy, and I talked about my philosophy, and then I wrote it down, and my philosophy is the 3 R's, because you don't wake up every single day feeling optimistic. Okay, so
No, not even the normal person does at all.
this is the day that I have. This is what I'm going to expect. So you have to have, I call it rigorous optimism. You
Okay.
have to pounce on being optimistic, and it's a hard work. So you have to be rigorously optimistic. And
So you kind
then,
of, so with the rigorous autism, hold up. So do you, with that, you kind of, so if you see the train of optimism starting to go on and you see it starting to leave the station and you feel just a little bit of hope or something, just a little bit to jump on that train, you give into that feeling all the way and you just ride that little bit of optimism for as long as you can. Oh,
listen, I was very depressed being in a hospital room, and
yeah.
because you've got support, you've got your family, but you know what? They all leave some way. We're all alone at one point in our lives. Your baby goes to bed, she's alone. Your wife has moments where she's alone. You have moments. I have in a hospital room, you have a lot of alone time, and then it seeps into depression, and then it seeps into suicidal thoughts, and you have to
Mm,
overcome that, you know, based on your you have to dig down deep down in yourself, and like, I don't want to die. I want to succeed. I want to get a new heart. Whatever it is you want, whether it's monetary, family, personal experiences, friendships, sometimes it's not a given. You have to work for everything. So then I coined this phrase, rigorous optimism. But then you also have the 3 R's. You have to be rugged, and you have flexibility. So, you can't, you have to be mobile. You can't be, this is the way it is, and I'm not going to change, and you can change, but I'm not going to change. You have to be a little flexible in your attitude and your relationships with people. So I call that rugged flexibility. And
okay.
then you have to, as you said to me, I'm not the only person out there. We all know people that are resilient, whether it's they're resilient because they've taken, you know, a hit at work, or whether they got, had an accident, or we all have resilience, but you have to face it. Some people don't want to face it. I'm not resilient, that everyone is resilient until you're faced with the fact that, you're going to die, or you're going to live. It's fight or flight or freeze or flop, but you will move on. So you have to have, and I call it resilient life. So it's the 3 R's. And then I had to kind of reinvent myself. And that came with, I started a podcast, not a podcast. I get the words mixed up. I started a website called Personal Stories. And it was kind of like what happened to me along the way. And I don't really publicize it and promote it, but people just find it and send me their stories. And then what happened was, because I had a wife, and who my wife was my caregiver, and then I not co-parent, I co-caregive with my two brothers with my mother, 90-year-old mother. So I both I receive care and I try to give care as much as I can. So then it's like I was walking around, and you have to pay attention to the signs when you walk around or you interact with people. You'll see people that you think they're invisible, but they're there. They've got a caregiver. They've got someone supporting them. So I came up with Caregivers Today, and that's a reality show. And I know I'm going to succeed. And so we broke caregivers down, Caregivers Today. There's no nice way to say it, but based on disease. So heart disease, you've got Crohn's and colitis, you've got Parkinson's, you've got Alzheimer's. So I have a specialist, a doctor who's an expert in Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, heart. Then we have a caregiver, because the show is about caregivers. And caregivers suffer too. We
Mhm.
take advantage of them because they're nice, whether they're paid or a family member. We are capable of doing so much more ourselves.
Yeah.
Maybe we can't reach for the glass, but you can not be a horrible person.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
use the word asshole, because being an asshole, you create resentment. But there's if you want to, like, being a super communicator, I'm not a therapist, so you have to dig down with that person. Why? What made them that way? So, but
Mhm.
a little bit of kindness, and caregivers are all over your place. You don't know until you see them. And so then we have a caregiver, then we have a therapist, then we have a advocate, because everyone needs a support. Everyone needs to someone say, I'm an advocate for the American Association of Hearts. I'm an advocate for, the Liver Foundation. So you have to have an advocate, the show. And then, you know what? I think there's a comedy, I'm not a joke teller, and you're not a joke teller, but situationally, things are funny.
Yeah.
When I went into the operating room for them to remove my heart, I was telling the surgeon, I've seen this show on YouTube. It's going to take you what, 3 minutes, 5 minutes? And it created a moment of joy. Like, everyone's laughing. It's not going to be 5 minutes. It's going to be at least 8 hours. So the fact is, there are moments of levity, funniness with any situation. So I want to have that moment. America's funniest caregiver story or patient story, and then followed up with a nutritionist. Whatever your disease is, you have to have you have to follow a good diet, and then exercise. You can be in a wheelchair. You can be, you can move your arms. You can move your legs. I'm not dealing with the people who can't do anything, but you can move your head. You can turn side to side. There's so many things that you can do if taught.
Mhm.
And then I
Yeah.
wrap it up.
I think that's a Oh, sorry. I was waiting. I thought there was more to come, but I think that's really cool. And caregivers, I think, are exactly what you said there. They are definitely taken advantage of. They are definitely taken for granted. They are
Yeah,
definitely taken for more than they're paid to do. And I think one thing that's like not thought about for like caregivers often is that they they care about these people that they're giving care for.
yeah,
They care like about the individual. I mean, because we're all human. We
yeah,
care for one another. And yes, and we grow these personal attachments. Like if it's a little old lady that's like 85 and she has Alzheimer's and she has the same caregiver for 10 years, and that's the caregiver sees, okay, I'm the only person seeing this lady for 10 years, spending time with her, all this stuff. You get really attached to those people. It's
yeah,
just human attachment as a whole. And we get to know them. We talk to them. We feel for them. We
yeah,
human with them, essentially. We become, we human with them, because that's what's all about at the end of the day. We're all human. And I think this project idea just highlights that we're all human.
yeah,
And I feel like that's part of what you're hoping to achieve with it. But and to kind of highlight like these different diseases and to bring more awareness, because there's
yeah,
not nearly enough awareness with those, what heart disease really looks like, what Alzheimer's can really look like, what Crohn's can really look like, and what Parkinson's can really look like. Like it's hard to see that of someone you love and someone you care about deteriorate through these
yeah,
things and to go downhill. My great grandparents passed away when I was really young from Alzheimer's and dementia, and it took their lives, it took over. And my grandfather passed away a few, I don't know how many years ago now, but from kidney failure.
yeah,
And so these diseases, they're nasty, they're invasive, and the people around the people who are suffering are not are, but have to be the most caring people, because they're the ones literally wiping their butts, sometimes too. If that's what it comes to, they're doing it. They're doing this work, and they're undervalued, they're underappreciated. And so I think highlighting that's really important. Uh, Along with the 3 R's, I think is a really great framework for some of this too. It highlights all those different frameworks within this project.
yeah.
To how people have to be optimistic through going through these dark, dark, dark days. Like that alone time is dangerous. It's dangerous for the mind. It's very dangerous for older people. One statistic that I looked up, and I'm trying to recall it off the top of my head here, but I want to say the second highest population of Americans who commit suicide are older adults. There's a lot of older adult suicides. It's a big issue, you know,
And being
and so
alone, and being sorry,
Mhm.
interrupted you, but it's also
You're
being
fine.
alone because you don't have community to you know, and I
In love, yeah, it's a scripture from Second Corinthians.
but
Not enough
but
light on it. I can't see the shadow, but it's from Second
yeah,
Corinthians.
but the fact is the kindness of strangers. I
Mm,
mean, so caregivers, if they're not related, if they're not your sibling or your wife or your parent, they're doing it for the money. Yeah, they're professional caregivers, but you know what? As you said, they form an attachment.
they're humans. They're
Yeah.
humans,
So
just
so I
like you and
want
me. Like Yeah, I'm a paid professional. I work in mental health. I see families through my program. My program that I work in is an intensive outpatient counseling program, and but we have these families and these kids for very short periods of time. 6 months, 9 months, a year, up to really a year and a half, most in most cases, to get them stabilized to a point where they can be successful in outpatient. After being the intensive. Because Washington State was great. The whole program formed out of a lawsuit because there was no step between traditional outpatient counseling and inpatient. And there was a really big need for something in between. And so the program I work in fills that need, fills that gap. But, we get to know these families. I don't know how many times I've been going to a place and I drive past the street or something and I'm like, man, I wonder how that family's doing. Or I go past a school, I wonder how that kid's doing. Or I just remember these random things and things like that. And there's been many final meetings with these youth and families as we discharge them to a lower level of care. And you know tears fill the room, because we're humans at the end of the day, whether we're
Hmm.
paid or whether we're not. And so it's important to recognize that human aspect of everybody around you, not just in the context of caregiving, but in the context of life. Like everybody around us, like yourself, myself, we're humans. At the end of the day, we both have both of our blood bleeds red. At the end of the day, we both live in the same spot, live in the same place. One of my favorite episodes that I did was one of my favorite. I have a lot of favorites, but one that I did, episode 160. The title of that episode is "You're Not Better Than the People You Shop at Walmart With," because you're
Right,
not.
right.
You're not. And so I think understanding that and understanding the people around you that are just people. They're just trying to buy milk. They're just trying to buy deodorant. And guess what? You probably have a lot more in common with them than you think. And
Because
so
you're
I think that,
shopping at the same market too. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah, you shop in the same places, you get gas in the same places,
Right.
you walk the same streets, drive the same roads, drink from the same soda fountains at the gas station.
Yeah.
You have a lot more in common with the people to your left and right and all around you when you're at the Walmart than you think. I think this Walmart analogy is really cool when you really think about it and you break it down and you apply it to these different things. Like this Walmart analogy is almost mind blowing when you think of it, about how similar we are and how we're all just having the same experience, just from a very slightly different perspective. And one thing that I like to share that highlights this is, and also I don't know how I got here, but my brother and I, we have the same biological mother, but we have different dads, different biological dads. And so the way we were raised, though, we were both raised by a grandparent. He was raised by his paternal grandmother. I was raised by my maternal grandmother, or our maternal grandmother. But we grew up very similar: sports, hobbies, interests. And it took us until we were, I want to say, 4, 5 years ago now, where we finally connected. So we weren't adults until we connected. Both had kids, families, life had happened. And it was just mind blowing to how similarly we were raised, how similar our paths were to that point. You know, a lot of it, goes back to the whole nature versus nurture argument. And there's a lot of things in there. You mentioned like when people are assholes, again, nature versus nurture. There's a lot to be said there as well from a psychological standpoint. So it's really cool
But you
to
know, the
see.
thing is, I was the miracle that I got a woman's heart. It was a miracle that someone in Northern California, some family member, maybe she had it on her license, or maybe they convinced the family member to don't die in vain, because you've got organs that other people need, whether it's a heart, lung,
Yeah,
kidney, pancreas, corneas. I mean, so
something.
generosity of woman that I don't know.
Have you ever met any of her family, gotten her name, or is there
So
there I'm sure there's record of that somewhere though.
no, no, no. It is very privileged and secret, because
That's too bad.
it's, you know everyone thinks on YouTube, oh, I met the family and it was so nice, and we now celebrate the heart. And no, those are the rare exceptions.
Yeah,
So I
of course, there's always exceptions. There's always exceptions.
wrote the letter to the family after a year, because when I got the heart, and I'm still going through it, heart came with a virus, and I was negative, the heart was positive. So I'm still going through that situation with the heart. Also, I also had another issue, spasms of the heart, not spasms in your feet and your legs. It's spasms in your heart. It's not a perfect, but it's pretty good, because my heart was dying.
I mean, it's better than what you had,
Oh God,
You know,
my
we're
heart was
grateful where we're
dying.
grateful.
Yeah, so the generosity of people giving the organs. And I mean, there's 3,000, maybe 3,500 hearts a year.
That's crazy.
That's crazy,
There's
because
millions of people who die every year too.
no, it's almost like 20 to 1. People need a heart and they don't make it. Kidneys, lungs. I mean, a neighbor of ours, the daughter was brilliant. She was like 22 years old, went to a major, very famous university, and she died waiting for her lungs.
It's
And
so
she got an
sad.
infection.
That's so sad because it's like, what are you gonna do with it? What are you gonna do with it? What is your family gonna do with it? There's no point except if maybe of course there's always exceptions.
Religion.
Maybe there's religion and personal beliefs, things like that. But I'm in the camp, much like yourself. Like what I feel like you're in this camp. Like if you can give, like if you can give.
Exactly.
Like what are you gonna do with it? You're literally dead. You're
Right,
literally dead. You're
right.
not using that heart. You're not using those kidneys. You're not using that pancreas, that liver, that cornea, that brain
Mhm.
stem, spinal disc A515, whatever. Yeah, I don't know the spinal cord vertebrae, whatever, but
Mhm.
it's like what is that going to do with you? What is that going to do for you? Nothing. It's just going to get burned or buried in the ground and go to waste. When there's
Right,
someone out there who still has a chance at life, and you could give them that second chance at life, or
right.
that renewed chance at life, restart their clock a little bit, add a little bit more on to their clock, allow them to see their grandchildren, allow them to see
Mhm.
their children, get through a certain big life event, whatever it might be. Like you don't know, because you'll never know because you're dead. But if you can do that and you can save a life by doing that, I mean, it's just like donating blood or donating plasma, like, what are you going to do with it? You're going to make more hour after you leave. You'll be fine in a couple hours, like drink some juice and drink some water and have a snack and you'll be fine. And, there's people who need that blood. There's people who need that plasma. There's people who need stem cells. There's people who need your bones, your organs. If you're healthy and you're able to, then great. Even if you don't think you are, still put yourself down as a donor, because maybe, just maybe, there's an ankle that's perfectly healthy and great. Maybe there's a knee. Maybe I don't know if you can transplant knee. I'm sure you can. I don't know. It's 2024. Medicine's great.
Well,
Except
no, the,
in
the,
America, but
the knees,
you know,
they get it like,
yeah, you can make one out of
other
plastic and
material. But what I'm saying is, I didn't want to turn this show about you and me, and getting a heart transplant into a plea for organ donations. But if that's where we end up, because everyone should, as you said, they don't need it.
yeah,
Why don't you give a life? So
yeah.
one life, affects, 8 body parts. Do you know what I'm saying? So,
You could affect 8 lives, like 1 to
yeah,
8 ratio. That's crazy.
yeah,
And just think about that. If you're thinking about it and you're on the fence, just know, like, I'm pretty healthy, and 1 to 8, like, I could impact 8 people and do some real good in the world, leave a legacy through
yeah.
that kind of thing. So who knows who it could help. So I think that's important. We can move off that now. I just think it's super important. I think that's a very big thing here to make sure that you do something with it. Do something with your time that you have now, and do something with the time you have later. And it's no mistake. You
Yeah.
mentioned that it just so happenstance and whatnot. And it was a miracle. Like, yes, absolutely, it was a miracle. But there was a reason. There's 100% a reason why that woman in Northern California on that date at that time passed away, and you were ready for her heart, same size, same body type, everything like that. Like, there was a time, a place, and a reason for you to continue on.
Hmm.
And there's a time and place and reason for all the other people to carry on if they're able to carry on. Each one of us has a purpose. Each
Right.
one of us was put on this earth for a purpose. I truly believe that. And so if you can help from your purpose that you already went and lived, and you can give that more purpose to 8 more people, and then that creates a bigger ripple, like a 1 to 8 ratio. Like, that's 8 times who knows how many millions of people just off your one body that's dead. So I
Yeah.
think that's cool when you put it in that perspective and you think about the numbers and the exponential growth and the impact that that could have on the world, and someone's world, a family's world, is massive.
And the interesting thing is, I mean, there are, when you're young, you think everyone thinks they're invincible,
Mhm.
invincible, right? I don't have to worry about the chaos in life. I'm not, I don't need to see a doctor. I don't need, a heart cardiologist. I mean, those are for older people. But every moment. You're Anything could happen to anyone at any moment. The odds are in the small, right? I mean, that's why insurance companies make so much money. But the fact is, it happens. Your house burned up, but you think your house is not going to burn. But you know what? Some random piece of leaf was on fire. Your house now is on fire. People don't think about those things. That's why
Mm.
insurance companies make all that money. But the fact is, you wake up, you go to work, you see your family, and you're in a car. You know, what happens? It's not you. You're a good driver. What about the other person who's reading their phone and bangs into you or sideswipes you? You know, car accidents. You can slip and fall. You can walk through a crosswalk and the other person didn't see you. I mean, there's so many incidents that,
Mhm.
what I'm trying to say, life is pressure. Life is precious. Life is
Absolutely.
precious. So we don't know what the chaos that we go out into the world would. Most of the time, you're going to be fine because you're young, you're invincible. But there's that 1% that will get something. I never wanted to get a heart transplant. I
Yeah.
wanted to know a person in my group of friends. Hey, this guy got a heart transplant. Can you believe that? I, I didn't want to be that guy
You don't
or
wanna be,
that
yeah,
girl.
you never plan on being that guy that
Yeah.
everyone talks about, like, that had the medical issues, that had the strokes, that had the heart transplant, that had all the things. You don't wanna be that guy in, for me personally, like, you don't wanna be that one guy in your group of, well, now 2 of us, but you don't wanna be one of the 2 guys in your group of college buddies of, 10 of you guys, of the 2 out of the 10 that are divorced, you know? You don't wanna
Okay.
be the 2, you don't wanna be that number,
You
but
want
it
to be the
happens.
eight. You want to be the eight guys that they're speaking. Oh, that guy got divorced. That guy.
Mhm.
Can you believe what happened to his kid? What happened? I mean, you don't want to be that person. I was that
Mm-mm.
person. I was
Mhm.
that person. I was healthy. I worked out. I walked. I was super fit. And boom, I got not one, two strokes. I got aphasia. Was that guy who people said, "Oh, did you hear about Jonathan Bogner? He got a heart transplant." Wow. So I was that guy. What am I going to do about it? I don't want to do nothing. I have an opportunity. I'm a producer. I'm creative. I'm an expert in my own health, and I'm curious. I want to know about other diseases. So I
Mhm.
created my new purpose in life. And my purpose is, let's explore diseases that either affect you now or the diseases that will affect you, or you know someone, or it's your parents, your grandparents. Uncle Joe had a heart transplant. Uncle Buck, he had a stroke. Aunt Marion had a stroke. We don't know what will happen to all of us, right?
Mhm.
We're just planning on, going and doing a spacewalk, going into in space, and we think that's great. That is great. But we're living in we're not billionaires. We're living in the real world. What can we do? Simple acts of kindness, and watch a show like mine, about the caregivers, the people that maybe it could be you, maybe someone. It's all around us, and you just have to pay attention to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all around us. There's always opportunities for kindness everywhere we go, every single day. And it's all about if we're paying attention, if we're intentional about trying to find them, and when they're there, we take advantage of them and we show the kindness.
Hmm.
And that's what it's all about. It's that simple. Everyone, you can tell me right now. You can message me on Instagram, wherever at. You can tell me that's easier said than done, but it's not. It's really not. It's really not hard to be kind. It costs you nothing, and kindness comes in a bunch of different shapes and sizes. It's all about finding it, doing it, and just being kind. So, I guess last question here before we get into kind of the end of this conversation we're having here. Over the years, how did you navigate and maintain positive or healthy or decent relationships with your family, with your wife, your kids?
My wife has been my rock. We love each other. Sometimes we don't like each other, but that's common. You can't always be lovey dovey. And so I annoy her. I actually really annoy her. She does not, she doesn't annoy me as much, but we
Same, yeah, I
quarrel.
get that.
Yeah, but we quarrel. But ultimately, there's a bond between us. And we've been married for 33, 34 years. So, I mean, so we don't know what it's like apart. And I don't even want to experience that. So my
You said
wife,
30. You said 30 something years.
no, I think 34 years we've been married. Yeah.
Wow! And congratulations, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I came, both my parents, my parents and her parents were also divorced. So
Mhm.
then I've got two sons, and I was reinventing myself to be a reality producer. Both my sons one son was like 11 or 12, and the other son was 14, and we went to therapy, and it really helped. But today, both sons live in New York. I love them. Sometimes I disagree with them, and sometimes I don't like them. But you have to acknowledge your feelings that sometimes you don't like them, and
Mhm.
so and sometimes you feel sorry for them, and sometimes they feel sorry for you. But we have to move on. And so I heard an expression which a friend of mine told me, and it's called duckaroo. Do you know what a duckaroo is?
I don't know what a buckaroo is, but kind of good.
Duckaroo. So he said a duck, all water washes off a duck's back, right?
Okay.
Water goes off a duck's back.
Okay.
and a kangaroo can only move forward. So he called it a
Oh, I get
buckaroo,
it.
buckaroo. And I'm like, I think I know instinctively what you're talking about. And I Googled it, a duckaroo. I like that. Don't think I am it, but I want to aspire to it because I always told my kids, you have to move forward in life. And
Mm,
sometimes you wonder what happens if I did this. But we're living in the moment. We're living in the future where we're not living in the past. So the duckaroo. And so that's the situation with my kids and my wife, and we've got nieces and nephews, and now have a granddaughter. And
awesome.
so it's not perfect, but
Absolutely. No, I love that. And I think that's so important to keep that perspective. Like, is it perfect? No. But there's always the same thing. There's always the core things there at the end of each day, right? The love you have for your sons, the love you have for your nieces, your nephews, your grandchild, for your wife. That love is always there despite everything, whether you agree or disagree.
Mhm.
And it's okay to agree or disagree with your children. It's okay to disagree or agree with your parents. It's okay to disagree or agree with, well, probably just agree with your wife, but it's okay if you don't all the time, you know?
Yeah.
And my cat doesn't agree with me saying that, but it's important to recognize that and to understand that dynamic and to be okay with it. At the end of the day, everyone still loves each other and is there for each other. If something was to happen to one of your sons, I bet you would figure out a way to get there as soon as possible. If
Mhm.
something happens to your wife, you're going to be there and vice versa. They'll be there. They'll show up.
But
So,
I mean, in my situation, one son showed up and one son didn't show up. And I think the son that showed up, he was on his way to San Francisco to pick up his stuff. He got the news. I got the call. I'm getting the heart. I'm getting the heart in 12 hours. And he turned around and he made it back in time, and it brings tears to my eyes. And my other son
incredible.
didn't show up. We're still dealing with that because he's got issues with me and I have issues with him. And I don't know if they're going to ever resolve, but we I feel whether he wants to join me or not, it's about, me understanding my actions and my interactions with him and being either okay with it or want to change it. So it's self understanding myself and understanding my actions. So I have to be comfortable with them or I have to change them. And right now, I'm comfortable with them.
Yeah. And that's okay. We all take, whatever path that looks like to get through that, for that forgiveness, for that relationship to be repaired. If it's ever repaired, is okay. It looks different for everybody, whether it happens tomorrow or happens in 10 years or whatever that time frame looks like. It's different for everyone to come around to those things. It can also be a personal journey too.
Yeah.
I don't plan on really ever talking to my biological mother again, but there is a lot of forgiveness I have towards her. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of, forgiveness and things I have towards her as an individual for the choices she's made, things like that. There's a lot of forgiveness I offer her. Will I speak to her again? Probably not. Will I
Mm-hmm.
interact with her ever again? Probably not. Will she ever meet her grandchildren? Probably not. But at the same time, those are my choices that I have to own. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, like there's a forgiveness that I have offered her in my own heart, in my own life, and through my own actions and whatnot. So, um, there's choices and whatnot, and we have to stick by those choices and do the things that we feel are best for us. So maybe, just hope that maybe that forgiveness comes someday in some form.
And
So,
it's okay to have fractured families.
mhm,
It's not ideal,
mm-mm,
but you know what? We have parents. They have choices. We are parents ourselves. We have choices. And we can't go back and at that moment, at that time, these were the choices that I knew were going to happen, and I chose this path. I don't know. So, anyway, I have two sons. I'm working on my relationship with one son, again, fractured, and one son is great. Both of them live in
That's
New
true.
York. Both of them live in New York, so it's actually even better.
Yeah, it's only one trip to take. So
Yeah.
that's great. Well, this has been just a great conversation. Before we get into closing here with my last few little fun and easy questions, I'm going to just take a quick moment to bring the beat back for just a moment. This beat is the opening and closing beats are brought to you by the Podbeat app. This is the lo-fi beat, the mellow lo-fi beat. It's one of my personal favorite. Podbeat allows you to turn any podcast or audiobook into a musical experience. Additionally, to close the podcast here, make sure to check out all the new things we have coming up over at youngdadpod.com. You can find the full transcript, show notes, and you can also click the little button at the top of the homepage, and you can go over to Patreon and become a patron for a little as $1 a month. So that is a great newer thing that we have available to all the podcast members, all the listeners of the podcast, to become a member over on Patreon to show your support for the podcast and show up for me. Also, this is the first appearance, as you've probably seen me going back and forth here with Podcast Kitty. This is Podcast Kitty. You'll be seeing her plenty. I just wanted to give her a shout out there. Other than that, also go down to the link tree, which you can find in the description of this episode for all the other brands, partners, other podcasts, and find more great ways to support the podcast as well. So, with that, Jonathan, we're just going to do a couple of these here. If you could go to dinner with any 3 people who have inspired you, alive or past, who would you invite?
I would invite my own dad because, again, it was a fractured relationship, and I'm not proud how it ended for both of us. So I would invite my own dad. I would actually invite my grandfather, my grandfather, and therapist, a therapist too, because those are things that I when I go back on my life, those are things that I want to. They're unresolved, and maybe it's Deepak or some major therapist that to play, or Buddha or somewhere. But yeah, those are the 3 people.
I love
Good
that.
question.
Thank you. And if you could go back in time and give your 45-year-old self, right, one piece of advice before all the health things began, what would it be?
My piece of advice was it's going to be challenging. You're going to need those 3 R's, but it will all turn out fine.
I love that. And then the very, very, very last question here, the one that every guest cannot wait for, the one that the listeners can't wait for. That's how you know we're at the end of the show here. What advice would you offer to a young dad, probably about age 18 to 22, who's just starting out his fatherhood journey? He's scared, he's nervous, all the things. What piece of advice would you offer to this very, very young father?
And my piece of advice for a young father, which I don't think you should be a young father at 18 or 21. Men actually mature, and it's probably better to be 30. But be that as it may, you're an 18-year-old, 21-year-old father. Remember all the things that you do with your kids. They will have a memory of those things that you did or you didn't do. So just be prepared when you have that meeting or that discussion or confrontation, what you intended to do. And you had the thought, the foresight to recognize that these are moments in time that you'll never get back. Try to make the right decision.
I love that. I think that's so important that to just remember that, like, it's all hindsight's 2020. Hindsight's 2020. Enjoy the time, enjoy the here, enjoy the now, and know that the decision you're making may not be perfect, but it's the right decision in the moment. Trust yourself, and I love that. I love all of that. Jonathan, this has been just an amazing, amazing conversation. We're a little bit over the hour here, so apologize to the listeners. I know you're used to us keeping it a little bit shorter, under an hour, but that's okay. Sometimes we go a little bit longer, and that's okay too. Go ahead and tell the listeners where they can find more of your work, keep up more with you, check out all those things, website links, things like that. They'll be linked in the description as well, but go ahead and tell the people real quick as well.
So if you want to get my movie credits, my reality credits, you can go to BognerEntertainmentInc.com. Or if you want to talk about personal stories, you can also go to personalstories.net, personal stories, and I would happily correspond or send you some words of wisdom. But you also have your own words of wisdom, so it's going to be a conversation. So please reach out to me at BognerEntertainmentInc.com or Personal Stories, which I prefer, personalstories.net.
Excellent. And those will be linked either in the description of this episode and or also in the show notes, which you can find available on the Young Dad Podcast, youngdadpod.com, youngdadpod.com, as well as a full transcript of each episode as well. And then also make sure to go over to all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Pinterest, LinkedIn. What am I missing? Any social medias? I don't think so. All the social medias, which you can also find right on the homepage of youngdadpod.com. Make sure to do all the things like follow, subscribe over on YouTube, Rumble, wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, wherever you're getting your podcast these days, wherever the people are getting their podcasts. There's so many great podcast hosts. So make sure you do the things you can on each platform to show your love for the podcast. Best way to do that is by following, subscribing, following on social media, leaving 5 stars, leaving a review, leaving comments, interacting and engaging with each post and each episode as well. And I think that's it. That's everything. Jonathan, thank you again so much for this conversation. Thank you for your time. And again, to our listeners, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, thank you so much for listening today. I was your host, Jay, and we'll catch you right here next time on the Young Dad Podcast.
Jay, I want to